So, like I said, the clinical cases, the UWorld has a clinical case simulation, which is just kind of some software that allows you to just kind of work through cases. They give you a little case presentation and ask you what test you want to order. So if you were going to practice this section, this would be the only way I know how to practice this section, other than just your standard regular old studying and reading, and just kind of like thinking about it. If they come in with back pain, what do you want to do? What's step number one? What's step number two? Remember, physical exam stuff is usually always number one. So look at it. We're talking about the COMLEX here, so wouldn't be surprised if like a forward flexion test or something like that would be a test that they would want ordered number one. And then the same goes, for someone that you think has like an abdominal aortic aneurysm. What do you want to do first? Are they stable versus unstable? Those type of things. This might be like an ultrasound, and this might be surgery or CT, depending on kind of the case scenario. And you would just kind of type in these answers. So, but once again, I did not actually have this. This was not on my test. I can't 100% vouch for what it is. We're just hearing people talk about it. It's just kind of typing some answers and stuff like that. So, next we're going to kind of get into books. First aid is the number one book for step one. For step two, I started using the Master of the Board book sets, and this is the same thing I use for step three. I'm very fond of the Master of the Board book sets. Also like the guy that wrote them, Dr. Conrad Fisher. He has a website where he does some board review courses and stuff like that. And I think that link a little bit later. Crush Step 3, that's another decent book set that I heard about. I never used it. Step Up to the USMLE Step 3. I heard this one was good as well. Once again, this is the one I used. That doesn't mean that's the best one. I like this one because it gave you the answer. At least that's the way I felt it did. It just kind of just put it out there. This is the right answer. If they say X, you need to pick Y, and this is why. And those type of things. It also told you the most common wrong answers and so on and so forth. And then kind of going from there, review courses, like I said. MedQuest is the one that's put out by Conrad Fisher, and he writes, the Master of the Board books. Take a look if you want. Don't look if you don't want. Review courses are great. They take a lot of time. Time is not something you have a lot of in residency. You're working long shifts, so it's pretty hard. At least I feel like it'd be very hard to squeeze in a whole review course for a subject area. But if you need to and you got to, then you got to. Remember also DIT, Kaplan. There's many others. I was never a big review course doer. I always just thought QBanks and good old fashioned time, and then just trying to find a review book, and then actually read it. I think for step one I had like 15 review books, and I read like a quarter of them. So for step two, I just basically picked one or two and actually read it, and same goes for step three. So that would be kind of my suggestions there. So goals. Once again, there's a lot of different resources, and cost is a big thing for step three, at least in my opinion, because once again, we're not usually trying to impress anyone anymore. We're just trying to pass the exam and move on in our career, and then really more worry about our actual board certifications. For me, it's IM or family, or derm or whatever it is that you do out there, radiology. So with that being said, try to find a cost-effective approach without blowing your piggy bank. So how well you're trying to do should direct how much money you're willing to spend. If you're trying to do very well, again, I would say spend a lot of money. If you're not trying to do as well, I would say try to limit it to one or maybe two QBanks, and then a book or two, and kind of go from there. If you're someone that's done well on the test in the past and you don't want to study, then don't study and just show up and see how you do. I'd probably take at least a practice test before I just walked in. Make sure that you would at least pass that practice test before you went in cold. That'd be kind of my suggestion. So goals. This is something big I always mention to the students here, which is just basically set a goal, and that means you actually have to pick a number. So a physical number. So you want to make a 573. You can't say I want to make greater than a 500. That doesn't work because that's kind of a vague number that you want. So you have to pick a real number. I want to make a 573. You have to write it down, and you have to look at it every day. And a goal is actually something that you're willing to adjust your plan for. So that means if you have a date scheduled for a weekend, and you basically said, so I have a date scheduled for this weekend, and the date is on Sunday, and it is Saturday, and I'm going to take a practice test Saturday. So Saturday is going to be a practice test, and I've told myself if I don't make greater than X, Y, Z on this practice test, I can't go on this date. Then you know what that means. That means if you actually don't make greater than that, you can't still go on the date. So you actually have to cancel the date and you have to study. So that's what a goal would be in my book. So meaning that you're willing to make sacrifices to achieve it. If you're not willing to make sacrifices to achieve what the goal that you set, there's no use in you actually writing anything down. But they've done studies. They've looked at it. Writing down goals, setting legitimate goals, and those being real things that you're willing to work for increases your chance that you actually achieve it. So this is just kind of some info on questions that I like to give everybody that I've kind of looked up over the course of the years. And once again, this is kind of a statement in a perfect world, which we'll kind of get down here to these two questions. But COMLEX did a study, which was on their question bank, but it was over lots and lots of students, and they saw that students improved at a rate of about 2 to 4% correct. So that's percent correct per 1,000 questions worked. So what does that mean? It means if you during the initial phase, so patients start out question 0 to about question 300, they called it the ramp up phase, and during that ramp up phase, they basically established a baseline. So that baseline was 50% correct, and then if you were to work 1,000 questions, you could expect to be at 52 to 54% correct at the end of that 1,000. The 4% happened a little more on the front end. The 2% happened a little more on the back end after you'd worked 2,000 to 3,000 questions. Usually your numbers started going down a little bit. But anyway, so that can kind of give you a goal to shoot for. So if you do your ramp up phase with ComBank and you realize that you're at 67% correct and you want a goal of 75% correct, you got a few thousand to work there, and that just kind of tells you that you need to work a bunch of questions. The other thing, the pace at which you work questions should be 8 to 10 minutes to work 10 questions. Don't go any faster than that. If you start going faster than that, you actually start missing more questions. And there's some pretty good info out there on this. At least some of the things I read was anywhere from 10 to 20% of questions that questions that you could get right, you would actually miss if you went much faster than this. And then reviewing questions. Everything that I've read says basically that you should take about 5 times longer to review a question as you did to work it. So if we had 10 questions here that we're going to work, and it took us 10 minutes to work them, we should review them for 50 minutes. So that means it took you 1 hour to actually read or work and review 10 questions. So that's pretty slow. And if you're in residency, you probably can't maintain that pace and work much more than 1,000 questions. If you can even work that many, that's carving an hour out of your day, for 100 days to pull that off, and that's pretty hard to do. Just not a lot of time there. So once again, in a perfect world, this is kind of the pace we should be moving at. But it's not a perfect world. It's time constraints, so we can't quite move at that pace. So you're going to have to find a way to move a little quicker, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So something else to note is that questions are written with a correct answer in mind. So this is why I stress to all the students to eliminate, and I can't spell, but that's the word eliminate. So you want to eliminate answer choices, and that's because, once again, if a question is written with the correct answer in mind, and you approach it by eliminating answer choices, then you're going to just basically increase the odds that you get it right. Some of the stuff I looked at, I think, was close to 10%. So once again, we got a few 10%. Looking at the blueprint was 10%, and eliminating answer choices 10%. So this is 10%. What is 10%? I can't really tell you. 10% of what? But this is just kind of how they worded it. And it's probably really like one of those 2 to 10%. Just like mortality reducers that you worry about. Yeah, I'd reduce mortality by anywhere from 15 to 75%. And it's like, what in the heck does that mean? But anyway, going from there, develop an approach to questions. So you need to have a way that you're going to work every single question. You can just do the standard approach where you just read the question from the top down and then pick an answer. Once again, I would just read it from the top down and then just eliminate wrong answer choices, and then you kind of arrive at an answer as opposed to choose one. You can do the stem first. You can cover the answers. Remember, each question should be able to be answered by covering the options. So you read the question, read the stem, and then actually just say what you think the answer is out loud or to yourself, and then look for that answer. Or then you can kind of do an answers first approach, which this is what I do. I stopped doing this approach, which was kind of covering the answers, think about what I thought it was, and then coming up to that answer. Because let's say I thought it was chest X-ray, and then I get down there and chest X-ray is not an answer choice, so chest X-ray is nowhere. Well, then I would get really nervous and anxious and uptight and think that I didn't have any clue what I was talking about. So I'd go back and I'd read the whole stem over again. It slows you down, and these things are timed, and you do run out of time. And I was always someone that struggled with time, so I just ended up doing an answers first approach. So this is the approach I used. Once again, this is just what I did. Doesn't mean this is what you should do, but I do recommend that you develop an approach, and just kind of take from this what you want, learn from it, and if you like it, you can try it. I really felt like this really helped my scores out. And I kind of stalemated at a point in time in my studying, and by changing how I approached questions, I felt like it really helped me get a good many more right. And one of the ways was I started always eliminating, and then doing this, which just basically decreased my errors. I was making a good many errors, just kind of from choosing stuff erroneously, but this kind of decreased errors. So first thing I do is I look at the answers first, and then by looking at the answers, I try to think about what the question will actually likely be asking. So if they give you a bunch of cardiac tests, I can expect the test to read something about chest pain, or heart something. And if they give you a bunch of cardiac tests and one like pulmonology test, then I kind of can think, well, if they're not really talking about lung stuff in the question, I could probably eliminate that answer. Then I would read the stem, and usually just by reading the stem and looking at the answer choices, I could eliminate. We had A, B, C, D, E, and just by doing that, maybe I could eliminate D. So I've already given myself I've increased the chance that I get this question right by 20% just by doing that. So now I'd actually go through the answer choices, and then I'd go through the question itself, and then after going through the question, I would go through the answer choices and say, well, what would the question need to read to make A correct? What would the question need to read to make B correct? What would the question need to read to make C correct? And then what would it need to read to make E correct? And then I would say, well, it doesn't read what I would think it would read to make A or B correct, but C and E are still viable options. And then I would ask myself the question about Occam's razor, and we'll talk about Occam's razor in a little bit. And then after I kind of went through all these steps, and if I did all of them in order the way I was supposed to, I would pick an answer. So in this case, let's say I picked E, and then I'd move on and I wouldn't come back because I knew that I'd given that question the best approach that I knew how to give it, and there was nothing more that I could do. So then kind of going from there, what is Occam's razor? It's basically a thought question that's applied to a bunch of different fields of study, but the big thing that it asks is basically for question writing and question working, is does the answer choice that you're going to select provide the most plausible answer to all the clues provided in the stem? So not some of the clues, all the clues. Every clue that is given to you in the stem, does it provide the most plausible answer to all of those clues? Not saying, well, that's that clue or that statement that they made there in sentence 4 was just a red herring. And if you make sure that your question, the answer you're going to pick, meets Occam's razor, then I found that really helped me get questions right. Because sometimes I would eliminate an answer choice because I didn't think it was viable, but in all reality it was.